selections, but this year is what everybody wants to hear about. Friedberg, tell us now, who is your 2022 biggest flash in the pan?
The undisputable
here we go.
biggest flash in the pan of 2022 was the All-In Summit.
Oh,
It
wow,
came,
that hurts.
It went.
That
It'll
hurts.
always be a strong and significant memory. It was such a hot thing for a minute, and then it died. So to the All-In Summit, I
Pour one
raised
out.
my glass. I pour one out. I toast to you, to Miami. And unless David Sacks carries it from here, it was a flash in the pan.
It was a flash in the pan. Sacks, who's your flash? Which Democrat is the flash in the pan for you? Sacks,
Well,
go ahead.
this is where I had Liz Truss. As you guys mentioned, she only survived 44 days as PM. I mean, that's only 4 Scaramucci's. She was basically fired by the bond markets after she combined a Thatcher-esque tax cut with massive energy subsidies to counter the price spikes caused by the war in Ukraine that she was fanatically committed to. This was deemed untenable by the UK central bank. It crashed the pound. And I think there is a serious point here, which is that as much as Thatcher and Reagan were the two towering heroic figures of the 1980s, I think zombie Thatcherism is not going to be electorally viable in the UK, just like zombie Reaganism is not going to be viable in the United States. I think that the conservative movement has to stop living in the past. We have to develop fresh ideas to meet the economic and foreign policy challenges of today.
Chamath, do you have a flash in the pan?
I actually think fusion literally was a flash in the pan. It lasted 10 to the negative 10 seconds. So that less of a flash you can't have without being a flash in the pan.
Ah, there you have it. Hey, Sacks,
Oh, hey
I see
guys,
somebody.
look who's here.
Oh, look who it is.
Oh, is it the proprietor?
The proprietor, the owner.
Twitter customer support at your service.
Sacks, you spent the last 15 minutes selling your new features on the podcast. Pretty exciting.
Well, the views are like incredible. And I saw Dave Rubin already made an observation that if you look at New York Times, their views are maybe 1/10 like my views, just me as a lone tweeter. And he said that their followers are inflated by just basically buying a bunch of follower accounts.
Yeah, the views thing is huge. That's why I pushed the views, which is like actually a lot harder feature to implement than you'd think, because the sheer number of transactions per second, I think it sort of requires system-wide on the order of 3 million transactions a second to actually calculate the view, calculate and display the view count, FYI. For Twitter Global. So it's like 3 million per second. It's a lot.
For those of you listening, Elon Musk has joined the pod. Elon, how's the first 6 weeks been, generally speaking, of owning Twitter?
Well, it's been quite a roller coaster, which obviously you've witnessed and been on the roller coaster as well.
Yes, the Dramamine. I've taken the Dramamine. It's quite up and down.
I mean, it's exciting, but I think it sort of has its highs and lows, to say the least. But overall, it seems to be going in a good direction, and we've got the expenses reasonably under control, so the company's not like in the fast lane of bankruptcy anymore. And we're releasing features faster than Twitter's history, at the same time as having contained the costs and reduced the cost structure by a factor of 3, maybe 4. So. The verified is obviously that's huge. It's a revenue stream as well as a means of identifying of like knowing that it's a real person and not a bot or a troll situation. Having the organization affiliation, which I suspect you talked about, that was an idea of David's that was great to have organizational affiliation. So you can know that somebody is an actual professor at Stanford, or that this particular handle is actually Disney, not someone simply putting "I work at Disney" in their bio. So I think that's going to be really helpful. Just really just having detailed and nuanced verification. So of all the various things that you say you are these things validated by other people and organizations?
Can you tell us how you do product iteration, Elon? Because one of the things that I think some people got jolted by over the last couple of weeks is like a bunch of things got taken away or changed or rules changed or policies changed, and there was very quick action. And then people had all this negative feedback about the quick action without communication. But your extraordinary talent is to iterate product to success. Can you just maybe share with people how you do product iteration in this context to help them understand how some of these decisions get made and why moving quickly is so important, and just, how you're doing this? I'm
a big believer in you want to look at the net output. So it's sort of like, what's the batting average? If it's like baseball, the point is not that you hit the ball, but it's like, well, how many home runs you get, and how what's your actual
slugging percentage?
Yeah, slugging percentage. Yeah. It's like you're going to swing for the fences. You're gonna strike out a bit more, but we're going to swing for the fences here at Twitter, and we're going to do it quickly. So. And I think generally, my error rate and sort of being the chief twit will be less over time. But in the beginning, we'll make obviously sort of a lot more mistakes. Because I'm new to I'm like, hey, I just got here, man. So, I mean, if you look at the actual amount of improvement that's happened at Twitter in terms of having costs that are not insane, and getting and actually shipping product that on balance is good. I think that is that's great. I think we're actually executing well and getting things done. I think we'll have fewer gaffes in the future.
How did you get to your intuition on what the efficient frontier of employees needed to be to make the product better?
Well, yeah.
Well, I observed part of this where you basically asked the question, who here is critical and who here is exceptional?
Yes. I mean, what the criteria is trying to apply, and obviously you're not going to be perfect if you're moving fast, and there's a lot of people you're talking about here, is that anyone who is exceptional at what they do, where the role is critical, they have a positive effect on others, and they are trusted, meaning they put the company's interests before their own, should stay.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and also is up for working hard. Was not Twitter's prior culture.
Yeah, were you surprised that the intersection of that circle and the people that left was basically 25%? Were you surprised it was that deep, or did you think your intuition was like, it's probably somewhere in here?
Well, I think you could just stand back and say, without knowing how many employees Twitter has at all, and say, how many people are really needed to run Twitter? Let's say you don't know what the employee headcount number is at all. How many people are needed to keep the site operational? Let's say, excluding product evolution, you basically have to keep the servers going. And you have to have customer sort of a support function to take down material that is in violation of the law. How many people? What's the minimum number of people?
That's in the hundreds, probably.
It's not exactly. It's not like a giant number.
Yeah.
Twitter still has 2,000 people, right?
Yeah, we still have 2,000 people. It's not nothing. And actually, there's actually on the order of almost 5,000 contractors. Almost all of the what's called trust and safety work, which is the support functions for the site, are done by contractors.
You're doing a lot more to take down hate speech than the company previously was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hate speech impressions are down by a third, and will get even lower.
Maybe you could speak a little bit to what we discovered, I think, in those early weeks, which was the incentive. The incentive previously was to create as many accounts as possible. And there were a lot of quick fixes to lowering all these, what people might call bot accounts. In some cases, it was people opening many millions of accounts. But we discovered this very early. How easy was it for you with the tech team to maybe lower the bot count and all the fake accounts? Maybe you could speak a little bit to that, because people have seemed to think that gosh, it's a really hard thing to get rid of bots. And it turns out it isn't.
But we still have a fair number of bots in the system. But I think the incentive structure, the way Twitter was set up previously, was this relentless focus on what they called MDAO, which is monetizable daily active users. Although I would say the monetizable part is dubious. But at least things that appeared to be monetizable or could be passed off as monetizable daily active users. So this created an incentive to turn a blind eye to fake accounts. So if the incentive structure is maximize the appearance of monetizable daily active users, then it's a strong incentive to pretend that a bot is real. And that's what happened. So we've taken a lot of steps to reduce the bots and trolls situation. So many. I think you're seeing that in the usage. It's not relatively rare to have your replies filled with crypto scams.
I'm not seeing any anymore. Friedberg, you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, just on your earlier question, Elon, when you first started making changes at Twitter after you bought the business, a lot of people kind of took notice at how extraordinarily swift and significant those changes were.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of technology companies that have CEOs and investors and boards, and we all talk to a lot of them, and they're all now having a conversation like, look at what Elon did at Twitter. How can we do something as aggressive, as swift, as deep? Do you think much about kind of the model you're playing for other businesses and other business leaders, particularly in Silicon Valley, and how you're operating Twitter? Do you ever kind of talk about that? Because I know you mostly talk about your business and you talk about the businesses you're running, but you're having a big influence, I think, in how other people kind of act and behave that are other business leaders and run other technology companies.
I mean, to be frank, I'm not really, I'm thinking about that much, because I'm just thinking about how do we, I'm just just get Twitter to be in a financially healthy place, and fix the engine of engineering so we can have a rapid evolution of new products. So, and I guess I'm in sort of in some ways an unfortunate position where I don't have to answer it. It's not public, and we don't have a board really. So, so I can just go, and I can take actions that are drastic. And obviously, if I make a bunch of mistakes, then Twitter won't succeed, and that'll be pretty embarrassing and sad. But as long as, like I said, as long as the batting average is good, that the wins significantly outweigh the mistakes, then it'll be a great future. And I think I'm very optimistic about where things are headed.
I think a lot of people want to talk about or understand, Elon, your position on freedom of speech and your principles. I'm curious. You've been pretty upfront about it. How do you think about it post-acquisition? What speech should be allowed on the platform? Kanye came back. He just went insane. His account got revoked. What have you learned, I guess, now that you own it? Because you must be getting a lot of inbound from people asking you, hey, how are decisions going to be made, et cetera. You've been clear. Transparency is super important in this, but maybe what are your thoughts on free speech and speech on a platform like this?
Well, I mean, the general principle, I think, is that we should hew close to the law in any given country. So the laws vary quite a lot by country. So I think we should be doing free speech that's close to the law. And that's the general principle. I think there are other things where it's like, okay, we like, for example, like if you're an advertiser, you don't want to necessarily, you don't want your ad, like let's say it's a family movie next to some, NSFW content, even if that content is text. It's like, they'll be like, that's we don't, so that's part of what, so there's more of an allowance for what some might call hate speech on the system, but it's not going to be promoted. It's not we're not going to be recommending hate speech. It's just at risk of stating the obvious. And we're not going to monetize hate speech. So, or negative speech. Like that's, nor would advertisers want us to. I think it's going to be a rare product that wants to be next to seriously negative stuff.
I was going to say, you referred to it as, hey, freedom of speech, but not reach, because this is a very nuanced discussion. Like, should this stuff be able to hit the trends, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, like it's certainly possible that some things that will be regarded as hate speech will hit trends, but I think it's going to be relatively unusual, especially as we are doing a better job of controlling the bots and trolls situation. And I do want to emphasize, like, there's a difference between the bots and the trolls. Like, bots are like fully automated accounts, but like a troll farm would be where you've got 100 people in a warehouse somewhere, each with 100 phones. And so they're actually humans, and they're going to pass a captcha test or and they can, reply and because they're actually got humans, but it's actually 10,000 accounts that are obviously not operating as real people. So that's stuff like that can cause things to trend negatively. That's why I'm like a big proponent of having just a low cost verification capability. And so, but like this is definitely a work in progress. So there's like I said, there's going to be, and I did like one of the first things I said after the acquisition closed was like we're going to make a bunch of mistakes, but then we'll try to recover from them quickly, and that's what we've done. And I think we've generally succeeded in recovering from them quickly, and it's been going pretty well.
Was the Paul Graham and journalist suspensions mistakes? Have you talked about this publicly, about how that all kind of got resolved at the end?
Yeah, I mean, the Paul Graham suspension was definitely a mistake, and I actually called Paul Graham to apologize personally for that one.
Did. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, on the journalist front, I think the journalist suspensions were not a mistake in that for some reason a bunch of journalists thought they were better than everyone else, and that if they engage in doxing and break the rules in various ways, that they're not subject to suspension, even though your average citizen is. And I think that's just messed up. The same rules should apply to people who call themselves journalists as to anyone else on the system. They shouldn't be sort of above the rules. For some reason, they thought they should be. That doesn't make sense. I don't think that's right.
Yeah, and the rules being transparent and upfront, I think that's what everybody's looking forward to. Maybe some just complete clarity and transparency. And you've said from the beginning, when somebody gets suspended or this shadow banning or this sort of tips into this really weird stuff that we discovered or you discovered, or the journalists discovered during the Twitter files, it's kind of a bummer that people are being sanctioned or shadow banned and they don't know it. If we're going to have a system, the rules should be clear to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So the something I've committed to, and we'll I think probably be able to roll that out in January. Just by the way, there is like a bit of we are not going to be rolling out a ton of new features over Christmas and New Year's and stuff. So there's like the next sort of feature set will probably roll out mid to late January, and hopefully in that we can include information about why an account is suspended or has what is called within Twitter visibility filtering, aka shadow banning. So, and some of these things are like there's a lot of things that just happen accidentally, where there's the rules in the system that are meant to detect whether someone's a sort of bot or troll or like brigading, where they're and then an account is sort of innocently caught up in that. So like there was some accounts just suspended yesterday because were temporarily suspended. Like they got like 12-hour suspensions because someone in trust and safety thought that they had posted a nude photo of Hunter Biden or something.
Here we go. Oh no!
But they hadn't actually done that. I don't know. It was just basically a mistake. There were some accounts that got a 12-hour suspension yesterday for in error, but they weren't sure why it happened. It was just essentially a mistake with Twitter customer support that was corrected.
Elon, let me ask you just a slightly broader question. One of the things we just talked about was the regime change that's happened, where we all have to act differently now that the risk-free rate is probably going to get to 5%. And I'm just curious, across all your businesses, so Twitter, yes, but really more importantly, Tesla, SpaceX, are there decisions that you will make differently or not at all, or will make that you wouldn't have made otherwise in this new regime? And how often do you think about that kind of stuff?
Well, I think it's more like it does seem like we're headed into a recession here in 2023. The magnitude of that recession is debatable, but I think it's at least a light to moderate recession. Potentially, it's on the order of 2009. So I think it's wise to kind of like prepare for the worst, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Don't get too adventurous. Like watch out for margin debt. Like I would really advise people to not have margin debt in a volatile stock market. And from a cash standpoint, keep powder dry. You can get some pretty extreme things happening in a down market. Like Brett Johnson, who was a CFO, who is a CFO of SpaceX, was at Broadcom in 2000, and he said that, and that's a good company making good products. And he said the from peak to trough, I think in less than 12 months, Broadcom went down 97%. So, like, even if you had a small margin loan there, you got crushed. It subsequently recovered, and I think to much higher levels. But if there's like mass panic in the stock market, then you got to really be careful about margin debt. So, but I mean, this is just as we know, the economy is cyclic. So, we're somewhat overdue for a recession. And my best guess is that, we have sort of stormy times for a year to a year and a half, and then things start to, dawn breaks roughly in Q2 24, if I were to get. That's like my best guess. Recessions don't, like booms don't last forever, but neither do recessions.
And it's a 14-year boom, so a 6-quarter recession seems like that might actually balance out. The last time it was 4 or 5 quarters, so it's not easy. Hey, the Twitter files. How much longer are these going to go on? It seems like every week another drop, and these are pretty controversial. How much longer are the Twitter files going to go on in your mind? Yeah. And maybe why is this important to you to make sure that people understand the stuff? Yeah.
I think it's important to, if we're going to be trusted in the future, to kind of clear the decks for stuff that's happened in the past. So, to be totally frank, almost every conspiracy theory that people had about Twitter turned out to be true. So, is there a conspiracy theory about Twitter that didn't turn out to be true? So far, they've all turned out to be true. And if not, more true than people thought.
Is there a part of the files that really shocked you more than the rest of them? Like, of the things that have been disclosed, of all of these things, is there something that really sticks out with you as like, holy shit, I had no idea this was happening? Or is the whole thing just a big dumpster fire? They were just looking at one huge thing. Like PsyOps versus the Hunter Biden thing versus the...
Yeah.
The number of FBI people involved, that was
The
pretty
FBI
shocking.
stuff is pretty intense.
Yeah, the FBI PSYOP stuff to me was probably the one that was the most insidious. Like the rest of it, I could think of like, a bunch of overzealous libs got used.
Yeah.
Got it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But to have like a secure skiff that essentially sends things that, government agents want the populace to basically think, it seems like out of a really bad dystopian novel. And then it turns out it existed. And then the thing is, it couldn't have just existed at Twitter. So what are we going to do about all the other places where this shit's happening?
YouTube, Facebook,
Yeah.
everybody.
That's why none of it seemed that surprising to me. I don't know, maybe I just believed all the conspiracy theories, but I've also been inside some of these companies and seen how they operate. So honestly, none of it was a surprise to me. Was it a big shock to you, Elon?
Wait. You Friedberg, you were, I think you can claim that you weren't surprised that these companies were shadow banning, although they denied it. But did you really suspect that the FBI was playing a role in flagging content for these companies to take down? That blew me away.
But content that's got nothing to do with like terrorism.
Yeah,
or
they're not
anything.
investigating crimes. Like, there's no crime.
Right.
Yeah, they literally flagged satire. Maybe they didn't get the joke. I don't know, but
They don't seem to be a humor-driven group, but they don't seem to have the best senses of humor. But aren't they supposed to get warrants? Isn't that how it's supposed to work in a democracy? They want information
They're
about
asking
users
favors of
they
their
file.
friends. Yeah, they're all friends.
That's the thing that's troubling to me. Put yourself on either side of the extremes.
Hey, we have Michael Schellenberger here who broke the FBI story in the Twitter files. So let's flip it to him and to see he can because I think maybe the audience isn't caught up on like what was discovered. So you want
Now I
how are
have
you?
to follow Elon Musk. That doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey, Michael.
I head back to work. So, all right. Thanks, guys.
See you later, Elon. Thank you for stopping by.
Hey guys.
Oh, hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm good.
Just a quick question for
Michael,
you.
first of all, who makes that sweater?
I'll send you mine, man. Do you want it or are you making fun of it?
No, I'm asking.
he's- he's
You're the
about to
master
make
of
fun of it.
sweaters.
Just
High
don't tell him.
praise from you, brother. High praise.
I'm asking.
Just briefly, Michael, isn't the FBI supposed to get warrants to
Yes.
take actions with folks? And then I guess, is that at the crux of this? Are they doing this at other companies, you think? Are they just like embedded in YouTube? Should we
Yes.
expect they're embedded at Meta and that they don't get warrants and they're kind of tipping the scales? And is that a good thing for society or a bad thing for society? It's a bit of a basic question.
Yeah. Well, I think there's multiple issues relating to FBI that I think have to be unpacked a bit. But the first one is that, FBI was constantly pushing the boundaries of what is legally and ethically acceptable in terms of requesting information. Now, I think what you saw over the last 3 weeks was a shift in, I think, our own understanding that we did see more pushback from Twitter executives against FBI and some alarm bells being rung in terms of the requests that were being made from the intelligence community. But these guys were really persistent. They kept asking for more. They kept getting more and more cooperation. It's very troubling. It does look like Congress is going to look into this. The two heads of the committees that are tasked with this have said that they're going to look into it next year. I think the other thing, though, that we saw that I think is more troubling was this persistent effort to basically communicate to Twitter executives, but also to news media, national security correspondents, that there was this heavy foreign infiltration going on, this Russian disinformation. And it appeared to me, looking at all the evidence, both that we saw from within Twitter and from outside of it, that this was pretty organized effort to convince key executives at Twitter and Facebook, but also these key reporters, that they should expect a hack and leak operation sometime right before the elections having to do with Hunter Biden. I find that very suspicious.
Can I make an observation? I think that maybe what we're finding out is that the mainstream media tried to go back to its 1980 Cold War playbook and turn Russia into a boogeyman. But as we're seeing in the Ukraine war, they're not nearly the formidable foe that we thought they were. And so it could probably be the case that in 2016, they were as inept technically as they are militarily right now. And so we may have just built up this monster that is kind of more like, a much smaller thing to be worried about. And we all ran with it because we had no evidence. But the Ukraine-Russia war is evidence that, this highly sophisticated war machine and propaganda machine is not that good at their job.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of interest that we're being served by hyping the so-called Russian misinformation threat. I mean, one of them was just to simply explain away the Trump phenomenon as a consequence of foreign interference. Certainly the people that ran Hillary Clinton's campaign had an interest in doing that. But then you saw it become a sort of way, I think, to condition people for the release of the Biden laptop. And again, I can't prove that, but it is striking that the Yoel Roth, this main Twitter executive, who I think was the object of this misinformation campaign, testified under oath that he was being bombarded with these messages all throughout 2020 that they should expect some sort of a hack and leak operation. So that when the New York Post finally did report on that computer in 2014, it was briefly censored by Twitter, but I think more importantly, it was discredited in the minds of many voters, including myself. I really didn't think that laptop was what they said it was, and it turned out that it was. So I do think there's a real troubling pattern of behavior by both the FBI agents, but also by the former FBI executives, including the deputy chief of staff and the chief counsel from FBI that were at Twitter as executives at the time.
And in fairness, Michael, this has been brought up many times, but I just would like your take on it because you're a lifelong Democrat, correct?
Until last year.
Great. So it would, just lest anybody think that you are like some MAGA supporter here.
Just look at my sweater.
Yeah, exactly. This was all in the backdrop of Trump asking for the Russians, during that debate to hack Hillary, for him interfering with Zelensky and trying to get him to give dirt on Biden, and the fact that Hunter Biden was obviously dirty. So to expect a hack, there was massive precedent for it. So that set the stage for this, correct?
For sure. And there's definitely that going on. And maybe that's all there was to it. It is just striking, of course, because, and I didn't even mention this is Twitter thread part 7 that I did on this issue. I didn't even get into the fact that, within a few days, many former senior heads of intelligence organizations and others came out and said that it was the result of a Russian disinformation campaign. So, yeah, sure. I mean, I guess we could find some other explanation for it, whether it was innocent or coordinated. But it is striking also, I think the other thing that we found was the contrast between the threat inflation and what Twitter was finding themselves. I mean, there was, Yoel Roth would respond to FBI that, yeah, we looked into these accounts that you mentioned, and they were all very low follower accounts with very little activity. So they just weren't finding very much foreign influence on the Twitter platform. And so I just think it was grossly inflated either for kind of good reasons or bad reasons, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, there's no perfect way to police this stuff, obviously. And, okay. Well, listen, we appreciate your reporting. Yeah. Thanks for doing it. And if you haven't read Michael's book, San Francisco, you did some great reporting there as well. And continued success in your investigative journalism career.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Hey, Michael. Sorry. Oh, lost him. It's all right.
Well, what do you want to ask? He's still here.
Oh, okay.
Hey, you did an interview on that. I think I saw it on YouTube or something, where you interviewed someone who was homeless in San Francisco and they were addicted to drugs, and they kind of said some narrative about how they were in this condition because San Francisco basically pays them to be homeless and pays them to do drugs on the street. Did that ever get published, and did that come out? Because it was such a compelling couple of minutes that you got on tape there. It really, for me, sent home a message of how far kind of progressive policies can take a society. And it's such a beacon for where things might go as other people start to think about adopting similar policies around the world, which is why I thought it was such important reporting. Whatever happened with that, and where can folks see that? Because it was such a moving interview for me.
Yeah, if you just Google Michael Schellenberger YouTube homeless, you'll be able to find all my videos. There's a lot of them that we did with people on the street. All of them, of course, people asking and wanting to do them. But yeah, I mean, I also wrote about that in my book, which is basically that San Francisco pays a cash welfare payment of somewhere between $600 to $700. Plus, you can get $200 in food stamps. And a lot of people, sadly, use that to maintain their addiction. And this gentleman, James, with the tattoos on his face, was very honest about how he was playing the system. In fact, he was himself, we found this increasingly, kind of horrified by the incentives that San Francisco was creating for people to live on the streets and live on the streets in their addiction. So yeah, you can find that on YouTube.
Like, so many people say incentives drive behavior, and unfortunately, these policies all came from a good place, from a kind heart, and the idea that we could help people in need. And unfortunately, the way that the incentives get structured, they can actually cause more harm than good. It's such an important lesson. I just wanted to say that because I think your reporting on this really hit that home. So thanks for doing that. I think it's really important because we have to do the right thing for people, but we also have to be careful that the policies are done in the right way. So thank you.
I think it's so well said, Friedberg, because when you're, Michael, and I just think you're very courageous for doing it, because it's very easy for somebody to say, oh, well, you are being callous. The truth is, incentives matter. And we see this over and over again. If you pay for something, you get more of it. And really, San Francisco is bearing the burden. I think this is what your book and a lot of the videos you've made, at least the message I got was, San Francisco has the lowest price of drugs, the lowest enforcement, and the most incentives. Therefore, they suffer because every person who is, addicted comes here because they speak to each other. And 90% of the people who are in San Francisco are here because we have created an incentive structure. Is that directionally correct as we wrap here?
Yeah, 100% correct. Including just the non-enforcement of laws against sleeping on the sidewalk, doing drugs in public, not requiring. I mean, ultimately, 3 times more people die living outside as an unsheltered homeless person rather than being in a shelter. And for me, that's all you need to know that we cannot allow our brothers and sisters to sleep on the street. No matter how desperate they sound about wanting to avoid going inside, it's 3 times deadlier to be on the street than inside.
So the compassionate thing is to force people into housing.
Yes.
And that's just very tough inside for people to say. But, because we have this perception that people have freedom and they should have the right to do this. But a person who's taking fentanyl, in your research, is not thinking correctly. And if it was any family member of ours, we would not want them to make that decision for themselves. We'd want somebody else to make that decision for them, correct?
I would want that if I was on the street so desperate that I was, smoking fentanyl and breaking multiple laws every day. Of course, I would want to be hospitalized. And usually, people overcome their addiction. That's the good news. We always leave out of it, but it is possible. People do overcome their addiction all the time, but they often need an intervention from family and friends. And if that's too late for that, then you need the intervention from the city. All
right, Michael. Thanks, you,
Michael. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
So as we get back to the All In News Network, we've now gone 24 hours a day. The All In News Network has launched. We'll just have a rotation.
We should sit at various offices throughout Silicon Valley, letting executives and CEOs
just
and
drop
founders
in. Imagine we did like a 12-hour marathon show for charity where just people showed up and we did what do they call those on TV?
What is the charity?
A telethon.
By J. Cal LaPlane.
Yeah, by J. Cal.
Yeah, no, just a telethon. J. Cal has to still fly commercial. We'll do a telethon. Hey, Sacks, thank you for setting up those amazing drop-ins. Well done.
Yeah, thanks, Sacks. Nice.
Thanks, Sacks.
Sacks, who makes your jacket? That's a great jacket. Is that custom?
That is an Isaiah.
Paul Stewart.
Isaiah.
This is the Christmas or holiday jacket.
Who is it by? Isaiah?
It's Valentino.
All right. Well, that's nice also. Okay. No, it's not Isaiah, but okay. Let's keep going here. We got to go to lightning round.
All right, let's move.
Biggest flash in the pan was our last. I went with crypto. Pretty easy to say that. I'm not going to give myself a big high five, but
wait, what did you guys think of the Elon conversation, real quick?
Well, he's very talkative.
And he's anything interesting or surprising for you? I mean,
he said the biggest thing that people want to make sure to avoid is margin debt. I thought that was interesting.
I mean, he's working hard, and
he's just such a focused guy. He just gets he's like so deeply into it. He's like, just do
ultimately
the thing
product wins, right, Friedberg? Yeah. I mean, if anything's going to win,
God, of course, that's it. Yeah.
So, I mean, and products are made by teams. So what I think is distinctly different here, I'm just giving my personal opinion. I don't have a formal
Microsoft
role.
Teams?
No. Teams make products. And so what I just want to say here is,
Microsoft Teams suck.
No, don't trigger the bundle. But I just want to say, this is a takeover as opposed to building a company from scratch. He's had to assemble a team and then work at this incredible product pace. And I think those two things are starting to click. Week 16 is going to look very different than the first 6 weeks. So
the product's already looking awesome. And it was nice of him to give me that shout out on the affiliate badges, but I'll just give a shout out to
I didn't hear it. What was it?
Oh, well, he gave me some credit for the affiliate badges, but I wanted to give credit to the PMs who approached me about that idea.
Master troll. I win again.
Oh, okay,
no.
fine.
The
whatever.
truth is, there
But
were.
let me give
Please do
credit
that,
to the
yes.
actual PMs, Evan Jones and Patrick Trauger, who they approached me about this idea they had, and then I helped, give it some momentum.
Here's the truth. When Dave and I spent the first couple of weeks there, now that it's a little more public, Elon's been on the program, what we found over and over again was that there were great features that were ready to be released that were being held back by management. And there were brilliant people with all the ideas that you'd think should have been released, and they just weren't allowed to release a lot of these products. Why? Who knows? But now that he's in charge, I think you'll see the product cycle is going to go much quicker.
The most important thing I saw, which is such an important lesson for anyone running a business in Silicon Valley, is that the pace of decision-making matters far more than the accuracy of decision-making. It's always been like one of my 3 big mottos.
Say more about that for entrepreneurs. Unpack that.
For me, like my number one, my 3 things are always like grit, bias to action, and then narrative. But like bias to action, the rate at which you can make decisions is a far greater predictor of success than the accuracy of the decisions you do make. And so you have to be willing to embrace failure. You have to be willing to make decisions that could result in something not being done correctly or making a mistake, and even getting embarrassed on the internet, by making mistakes and having to call people like Paul Graham and apologize for them. And
that was a big moment.
But the problem is, as a business scales, as professional managers are brought in, their incentive is to not make mistakes. Their incentive is to do things that are predictably going to work and are predictably not going to fail. And therefore, they avoid taking the risks and they reduce the rate of action, the rate of decision making. And that's why so many businesses ultimately don't scale past some sort of inflection point, or when founders that are willing to push that envelope step out, everything starts to fall apart. And it's so critically important, I think, to look at that as being, I think Elon's defining trait and characteristic is that this, regardless of the scale of the organization and the enterprise, he's still willing to act with that level of bias to action that you typically see in a small startup.
Okay.
And put his reputation at risk. Yeah.
Just to sum that
Friedberg.
up, I sat in a meeting yesterday. He said that if we're not rolling back 10% of the time, we haven't pushed hard enough.
Right.
Wonderful. There you go.
So, I mean, it's like
listening.
if you're never rolling anything back because you never make a mistake, maybe you're just not moving fast enough. You don't have enough.
You're not
of a
ambitious
bias.
enough. You're not fast
You
enough.
don't have enough of a bias towards action. You're too afraid of making a mistake.
By the way,
okay,
here's what's so interesting about the views feature is that a bunch of websites, I think it started because Instagram did a bunch of apps, deprecated, likes because they felt that it was part of this negative cycle. And so they took all this stuff away. And basically views is going sort of back in that direction and giving more granularity in terms of outside in social engagement on a post, which is, I think, interesting to see. It's happening in a moment where all these other sites and apps are actually going in the opposite direction.
Well, it's like a standard feature on YouTube, and it's very powerful for YouTube's network effects because it shows you how many views you get. So it discourages people from using other sites because you get the most distribution on YouTube. So it's weird that other social networks don't want to follow suit. I mean, in 1 hour,
they had it, but they deprecated. That's what's so interesting.
But I guess, my point is we've only had this feature for an hour and I didn't realize how much distribution my tweets were getting. And it definitely undermines my incentive to want to go use some other platform when I see the distribution I'm getting on Twitter.
Well, if you're getting 10 times more distribution than the New York Times, what's going to happen is people will stop listening and reading the New York.
I mean, it's sort of like this podcast itself. Like, I mean, people ask us to go.
And my point is we have to rely on social proof and anecdotes about the actual scale and the breadth and the reach, because it's impossible for us to get one holistic view that shows across all of these different modalities, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, how many people listen or watch. And, we add it all up and, we think it's in this, sort of 3 to 5 million range of people. But if you just had a numerical canonical number that was irrefutable, you just run over everybody.
This turns it into a meritocracy. This is going to be terrifying to some blue check marks when they see that the people who they report on get 10 times as many views as they do.
Of course.
Which is why when people, journalists call me or other...
Look at Sean Hannity. Go to Sean Hannity's profile, and for the number of followers he has, how pathetically engaged his audience is. It's all bots. It's all trolls. It's all nobodies.
I looked at Mitt Romney, just put out a video, whatever. In the first half hour, he had 100,000 views. Like every politician who starts seeing this is going to go, wait a second.
I mean, the world is...
I'm getting more views here than I am on MSNBC or Fox.
The world is
need to do
more
this.
rational place if Mitt Romney actually has more influence than Sean Hannity.
Let's hope. Okay, let's move on. We got to get through this quickly. It's our longest episode ever. Here we go. We are